Supervisors, August 23rd, 2016. I'll look to County Council so we can report out of closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors met in closed session this morning and discussed agenda items number 1, 2, and 5 on today's agenda. Agenda items number 3 and 4 were not discussed this morning. They will be discussed this afternoon after the regular agenda. In regards to agenda item number 1, the board met and conferred with its labor negotiators. Those negotiators were Allison Hauk, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, Georgia Cochran, and Steve Coffey. The employee organizations involved were the Institutions Association, Law Enforcement Management, Management Employees Group, SEIU Local 521, the General Unit Employees, Deputy Sheriff's Association, SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers Local 6434, and the unrepresented employees, which include confidential management, and appointed department heads. The authority to meet can be found in California Government Code Section 54957.6. At this time, the board took no reportable action. In regards to agenda item number 2, the board conferred with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation and the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Section 54956.9 in one case. This closed session is authorized by Section 54956.9 D2 and E1. At this time, the board took no reportable action in regards to agenda item number 2. Finally, in regards to agenda item number 5, the board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to subdivisions A and D1 of Section 54956.9 of the Government Code. The case involved is Award Homes, Inc. versus the County of San Benito and the City of Hollister et al., filed in the Superior Court of California in the County of San Benito under case number CU-15-0099. At this time, the board took no reportable action in regards to agenda item number 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Moving on to item C on the agenda, presentations and recognitions. For this one, it is a proclamation to Jacob's Heart Children's Cancer Support Services declaring the month of September 2016 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in San Benito County. There will be no presentation, but approval is needed, and then I believe staff will be sending the proclamation to the appropriate recipients.
I will make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the proclamation.
Okay.
Second.
The motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item D, public comment. This is opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on items of interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken unless it is provided by Government Code Section 54954.2. Madam Clerk.
Yes, Marcy Houston.
Hello, my name's Marcy Houston, and this is my third time in front of you guys. The Garden Mart. So far to date, I've been in front of you. This is the third time. City Council once, and not one elected person and not one staff person has contacted me about taking care of my problem. Now, you guys are all talking about other problems, but nobody's taking care of my particular problem. So I don't know how many times I have to keep coming here, but for the record, I'm going to identify my problem. And my problem is a law enforcement issue, and it's illegal behavior surrounding littering, loitering, trespassing, drunk in public, stoned in public, and panhandling. That's my problem. So if you want to say you're taking care of my problem, please keep it to that. So I have a couple stories here, and I'll make it brief, I hope, which kind of epitomizes my problem. Last week, I planted the mural, where the mural property is, we planted it. So I run a hose over there on water. County came on that property, private property, picked up one of the homeless people to take her to get a shower. I know who it is. I know them all. I'm not using names. So that's fine, whatever. The county then brought her right back to private property. Okay, so you guys are like legitimizing the illegal behavior. You bring her here. Bring her to public property, but you're putting her right back on private property. So I want to go through my Sunday. So I'm coming back to that, which will kind of be probably a little humorous, like I'm laughing crazily. My Sunday, place opens at 10. Dad and daughter walk in. Dad's a doctor here in town. Daughter's about 10. Shop, shop, shop. There's a guy standing on my wall, talking up the hill to the pepper tree, yelling up the hill. And I'm looking at him going, crap, what am I going to do? I kind of ignore it. I knew the doctor. I'm all situation. Okay, I thought, okay, I'll deal with this once they leave. Because my problem is, again, Marcy's problem, is I can go ask them to leave, and maybe they might be passive and do it. More often than not, they go ballistic. And that's when my customers start walking out the door. They leave. I'm thinking, great, I can take care of my problem. More people come in. 3-year-old boy running around. Elderly people. More people come in. And I should be, yay, I have customers. But instead I'm thinking, oh, shit, what am I going to do with this guy standing on my property talking up the hill? Luckily, one of my friends came in, and I had her call the police. And they came and took care of it. I'm a business person. I'm trying to sell plants. Why am I taking care of a problem you guys are responsible for? So I kind of just want to take a few seconds to go back to my first story.
If you can wrap up.
I will. So yesterday I'm watering. This same lady the shower lady, Marcy, will you hose me off? Miss Marcy, will you hose me off? I didn't get a shower since August 3rd. I'm all, no, you had a shower last week. She's all, no, I didn't take a shower because they took away my cigarettes. I'm all, great. This lady gave up a shower to smoke. I'm here begging you to help me. And you guys are spending time, money, resources, brain cells, helping somebody who would rather smoke than shower. And I'm here begging you. And so my big question in the sky is why? Why?
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to hear these presentations every meeting. Can we agendize to have the sheriff here and inform us of what our responsibilities within the city limits are as a county and as a sheriff's department?
I know we had an update from staff at our last meeting, right? So let's, we could put something on the agenda. I'll work with Ray, and we'll do something.
Actually, Mr. Chair, can we also send an invitation over to the city chief too?
Yeah, I know he was here last meeting as well.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll work. Thank you, Supervisor. Okay, no other speaker cards. Are there any other member of the public wishing to speak on items not appearing on the agenda? Now's the time to do so. Okay, see none. We will move on to item E, department head announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have an announcement out of our probation office. We have our chief probation officer, Ted Brand, here to give you an update.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I would like to announce that the probation department successfully completed its 2015-16 inspection from the BSCC for juvenile hall. This was, when I arrived here in 2014, we had started an inspection. The inspection is a biannual cycle, and we had a number of things to, I guess, complete and kind of fix. And this inspection this year was very, very smooth. And I would like to thank our juvenile hall superintendent, Mr. Frontella, and the staff at juvenile hall for their work in this regard. The BSCC was rather pleased with our inspection of the juvenile hall, and I'm just really proud of the facility and the services we have. So, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'd like to also give commendation to our staff, Dina Bias, as well as other staff members and within our county. We won an award from Trindale Insurance for most improved on our self-insurance this last year. I want to make sure the board was aware of that, the hard work that they put in. A couple of other items, Mr. Chair. We'd like to go ahead and pull item number 6 and 35 from consent agenda. There's some language we'd like to clarify on those two items. And we would also like to continue item 21 to a next board meeting.
Okay, so that was item 6
and 35.
35, and we'll continue item 21 to our meeting September. What's our first meeting in September?
I think it's the 13th.
13th.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our last item, I just wanted to make sure the chair was aware that item 36, our public hearing, is scheduled for 10 a.m. So I just wanted to make sure that was heard, 10 a.m. or thereafter.
Why are you continuing 21?
Because,
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
I just want to make sure it wasn't a mistake.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. De La Cruz.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It's still under his.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
We're good?
That's all the announcements that we have.
Okay. So at this time, we will move to our board announcements, starting to my left. Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Botello and I attended a facilities committee meeting, ad hoc committee meeting, and we got information on the Southside Hospital issue, the building, the property, and so we will be bringing forward to the entire board some recommendations in the very near future regarding that. And secondly, I want to just say thank you to Health and Human Services. They had a staff development meeting, and I'm very honored to say that I received their Deputies Award, and I want to thank you for that recognition. I'm very, like I said, very honored to have received that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Barrios. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This morning, Supervisor Munzer and myself attended the audit committee, and we got introduced to our new CPA firm, and hopefully that this year's audit process will be smoother and faster than the prior years. That's the goal, is to bring to the board a completed audit, earlier and earlier than prior years. And we had a good educational meeting. And also I attended the COG meeting with Supervisor Botello last week, and there were some discussions about resurfacing or bringing back some type of transportation sales tax in 2018.
Okay.
Thank
Supervisor
you.
Munzer.
Nothing this week.
Supervisor Botello.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Another facilities issue that Supervisor Barrios and I worked on with RMA staff, administration, with the high school district as well as the city of Hollister, is to working on an agreement to deal with the Nash Road issue that the high school has, as well as the regional park that the county hopes to move forward, and we'll be bringing back information to the rest of the board and to the public in the near-term future as well with that, hopefully a draft agreement. I attended a RCRC meeting in Sacramento last week, and the RCRC board took a position on 3 propositions that were fined on the ballot in November. Proposition 51, known as the Kindergarten through Community College Public Education Facilities Bond Act for 2016. Proposition 51 would provide $9 billion in bond funding for K through 12 and community college facility construction projects. And given the financial difficulties of financing school facilities, especially in rural areas, and the importance of bond financing to provide quality education in rural school districts, the RCRC board voted to support Proposition 51. Proposition 53 is a proposition that is known as the No Blank Check initiative. Proposition 53 would require statewide voter approval for revenue bonds for projects that meet certain conditions, including projects that where the total amount of revenue bonds exceeded $2 billion, and projects would be owned and operated and managed by the state. And RCRC decided to oppose that proposition because of the clear definition of a project wasn't defined. You could possibly have a project that benefits Northern California being voted on by Southern California voters, and that would not be a good thing. And projects that might benefit rural California, and it'd be determined by urban voters. And so we decided to oppose that. And finally, Proposition 54 is known as the California Legislature Transparency Act. And this is a new one to me. I couldn't get over this as far as the description of what happens up at Sacramento, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised at all. And it would make a number of reforms to the state legislative process, including prohibiting members of the legislature from voting on legislative measures until it has been printed and published online in its final form at least 72 hours before the vote. See, I didn't even know that went on, but we decided to support that. So that's all I have to report this morning.
Thank you, Supervisor Botello. I myself have no reports, updates. Moving on to our consent agenda. Are there any? Is there any member of the board that wish to pull any items on consent, with the exception of item 6, which is pulled, item 35, which is pulled, item 21, which has been removed, and I did get a request from Supervisor Munzer to pull 18, as he will be recusing himself.
Mr. Chair, can I just pull out number 24?
So Supervisor De La Cruz, 24.
Yes, sir.
Okay, does any member of the public wish to pull any items off of consent? See none, I will accept a motion for all the remaining on consent.
I will make a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So we will begin with item 6. This is from the County Administrative Office.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. You have on your agenda the regular agenda item that involves the discussion regarding the RFP response that we received for the library. I'd like to do a short background introduction, and then
I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's
item number 6.
Item number 6 on consent. That's with regards to the Treasury
My apologies.
Committee.
I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I was a little excited about that. My apologies. Members of the board, you have in front of you the agenda item number 6, which is the resolution involving the reestablishment of the County Treasury Oversight Committee. And Mr. De La Cruz, Supervisor De La Cruz, asked that we pull this particular item and discuss the structure of the resolution itself. Statutorily, the resolution provides for the appointment of the individuals by the treasurer. The concern is that the positions that are being named as representatives on the board should be substituted for the individuals that are actually named by the treasurer. And so what we would like to do is ask the board that the positions of the clerk, auditor, recorder, the representative of the Board of Supervisors, and the county schools superintendent be named as the representatives who will sit on the board, so that subsequent members or individuals who come in the future can be named as those representatives representing those particular offices. So, for example, if in the clerk, auditor, recorder's office, the auditor wants to have somebody from his office represent his office, he can name that person. That's what we would like to do.
Mr. Chair, just for thank you. The intention is just to allow for flexibility, and in the future, someone else can serve besides those named on a resolution.
That is correct.
And typically, individuals are not named in resolutions. It's usually side noted or divide. The motion is usually divided. But with Louis' suggestion, I think that compromise that brings everything into fold.
Okay.
Right. The treasurer does have the authority to name the person. But the statute, I think, is flexible enough to allow the representative of the offices contemplated, making it operative to name the position.
Any other questions?
No, just to clarify, we are then removing names from the resolution and just titles.
We are
or representatives of that department, and that's it.
Supervisor Barrios, that is correct.
Okay, so we can still approve it today.
Yes, you can.
With that change.
Yes,
Okay.
you can.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions of any board members? Okay, at this time I'll open up the public for questions from the public. See none, I'll bring it back to the board for decision.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
As amended.
Second.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0 for item 6. Moving on to item 18. Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to recuse myself on this item, being my wife owns property that is within 500 feet of it.
Okay. Item 18 is out of County Council's office.
This is for our legal services agreement. Let me make sure I'm speaking to the right one. Miller Star agreement for the Bluffs project. There's two actions before the board. One is to approve the legal services agreement and also authorize County Council's office to sign a conflict waiver letter. Miller Star has performed services, extensive services for the county for several years now, but her firm has also performed services for the project applicants, and that's why the conflict waiver is presented to the board for its consideration. I'm open for any questions.
Okay. Any questions from members of the board? This time I'll open up to members of the public. Questions, comments?
I have maybe a question and a comment. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I was wondering, on our conflict waiver processes, do we require an affirmative finding by the office of the county council that this is okay? I mean, there's two ways to make a finding. One is you can look at the conflict waiver letter and say, yeah, that's okay. The other way is to write a statement, an affirmative finding. I've reviewed all these documents and find that the conflict, there would be no conflict. There's enough separation here that there's not a conflict of interest. I am very concerned, both at the county and city level, I just bring up the city just in discussion, that we're getting an awful lot of problems because we're small and people are representing on occasion one side, and the next week they're representing the other side. And so to solve that, we have these conflict waiver letters. And frankly, I don't think anybody knows if they're worth the paper they're written on. So I would like to get somebody like the county council to make an affirmative statement in the long run, maybe not on this one because you'll have to change your procedures, saying I've reviewed this and I find that there's enough separation, or there are procedures involved that separate it, so there's no conflict of interest. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
In this case, just so the board's aware, there could be a potential, there is a relationship there with the project applicants, but the reason that we evaluated this, based upon her lengthy history with the county, her knowledge of our ordinances and our general plan, and because we have such a long history with her with a number of developments, we're a very important client of hers, and I think that her loyalty will be also to the county. And so we weighed it, keeping it with this attorney versus the cost and time of going with a different attorney that we have no familiarity with, and it's not familiar with our general plan or our ordinances. She's done other projects that are very similar recently to this proposed project. Most Sunnyside Estates is very similar in scope and project size to this project, and so there's going to be a lot of the similar type issues that are already revolved. And we can also track this project also, just so the boards, that we watch what's happening with the project.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor.
I'm listening to Marty's questions, and I'm just thinking about our past performance. And I recall our county council actually even advised us not to go into a relationship with a local law firm attorney because of all the potential conflict of interest with, some of their clients were coming before the board of supervisors during the general plan process. And so I guess, Barbara, what's the difference here? Because I kind of see almost the same kind of conflict scenario with that other law firm that, I will decline to state.
I think that Nadia and Nadia's firm are really specialists in land use.
But I didn't ask that question. That's not relevant to this discussion. The relevancy here is what's the difference between conflicts of interest? I'm not questioning their performance.
I think that's a little bit of a different issue when you're, in some cases, there's like a definite conflict when you're representing like something where the interests are actually adverse. Here's the question. Really the issue on this case is whether she would be as stringent or as hard on this applicant as she is on other applicants because of the history that she has with that firm. And the question is, as long as the county counsel's office controls like the scope and course of, you know, what we're asking for in a DA and keeps the monitor of that, we're the actual decision-making body. She's providing the technical advice on the CEQA. I don't know whether that answers.
But that was the same arguments that countered that other law firm. So I'm okay with this.
Basically, what it comes down to, Supervisor De La Cruz, is we trust Nadia.
That's not the issue. The issue here is that we need to be fair and treat everybody the same, and we're not doing that right now.
That's fine. If the board wants to have a policy that in no instance are you going to approve a conflict waiver, then that can be the board's policy, and we can go out and hire another CEQA attorney. As Barbara indicated, it'll probably end up costing the county more money, but if that's the board's policy, if that's the board's desire, then fine. The bottom line here is Nadia's done a lot of good work for us. She has a good relationship with the county. I disagree with what Mr. Richmond said. The conflict letters are taken very seriously by the law firms and the attorneys, especially Nadia and her firm, Miller Star Regalia, is a very well-respected law firm, a very ethical law firm. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a commitment to the client to not let previous representation interfere with their current one. But the bottom line is it's up to the Board of Supervisors. If you want to have a policy where you don't want to hire attorneys who have some sort of conflict, then that's fine. As long as you're aware of the consequences, which is it's going to probably cost you, the county or the developer, more money in the long term.
Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you. I appreciate Supervisor De La Cruz's concern and Mr. Richmond's concern, but we're dealing here with, no matter what you do, we have specialized attorneys in the state of California and within our own region that we can tap into. And so I believe that all the work that is being performed is going to be transparent. We are going to be setting the scope. And they have to abide by California law as well. So I'm very comfortable moving forward, even though the concerns are valid, as long as we have a piece of paper that does protect us on the conflict of interest. Should it arise, then I'm willing to support it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I defend myself since something was attributed to me?
I'm sorry, Mr. Richmond. You already had your 3 minutes. So.
But something was attributed to me that's not true.
I'm sorry. I can't allow you
I
to
did
speak.
not.
So at this time, I'll bring it back.
Anybody.
At this time, I'll bring it
I
back
asked
to the
for
board.
a finding.
Mr. Richmond, please. We have process and procedure here.
Well, so somebody can make a mistake.
I have to ask you to take a question offline, and you can address it when we have a break. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
I will make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Is there a second? Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-1. Okay, at this time, we will go back to, we want to get Supervisor Munzer in here. We'll bring it back to item 24, which was pulled by Supervisor Jaime De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr.
And this is out of Health and Human Services Agency.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm looking at the transmittal, and I was going to call it yesterday, and I apologize for not calling it yesterday. My only question is, do we have an accountability of the dollars being spent? Is there a mechanism? Because I can't get any information. I can't get a name. I can't get dates and all that. And I guess I understand why it's sensitive, because we're talking about children here. So from a fiscal perspective, let's talk about that, and let's take the other part away out of the discussion. From a fiscal perspective, is there an accountability process that ensures that is going to happen, and there will be receipts and all the other good stuff that the auditing department will be able to obtain?
Absolutely.
And that's my concern.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Give me more information. Just don't say yes. Give me more.
Well, when the staff go on trips, they're required to bring back receipts, no matter what the trip. Even if they go to Sacramento, they're required to bring back receipts, turn those receipts in. We're required to keep them on file for the auditors to look at so that the auditors are satisfied that we have a paper trail to account for every dollar that we've spent. In this case, this is a child welfare services case where reunification is with a parent in Mexico, and we've done this before. We came to your board before with this, and we use the procedures that Santa Clara County had developed in order to develop our own procedures. But there is a very detailed paper accountability process, and all of that is kept on file for the auditors.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, at this time, I'll open up to the public for any questions or comments on this agenda item.
Marty Richmond from Hollister. I was going to make some specific comments, but I'm afraid you will misrepresent what I said and not allow me to rebut it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other member of the public wishing to provide comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for questions, comments, or decision.
Mr. Chair.
I do have a question, or just clarification.
Yes.
Jim, the $15,000 that we are approving today is really not necessarily for one trip. It could be numerous throughout the fiscal year.
That's my understanding.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so that we can follow the orders of the court
Right,
and
it
not
may be
have to be
multiple-
coming
it may
back
be
to the
multiple
board
visits. Okay.
in order to make this reunification happen with this family.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Bring it back to the board for decision.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we approve out of county travel for up to 2 county staff members travel to Mexico.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 35. This is out of the Sheriff's Office.
I was just going to make it contingent on moving the items out.
I'll support you.
Okay. I just pulled this item out. There's some items that are stored in the space that's going to be subject to this MOU, and I would just like the board to make this agreement contingent upon everything being moved out of the space in time for the agreement to start. So we won't actually execute this agreement until that items are moved, and we're estimating that that can still occur by the date that they wanted to start use of the building. Are there any questions?
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, this time I'll open up to the public. Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for decision.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So moving on to item 36. This is our first item on the regular agenda under the public hearing section. This is out of our Resource Management Agency. Mr. Barnes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a public hearing to adopt the the budget for the CSAs, community service areas, throughout the county. It includes all of them. The budget is essentially the same as last year, with 4 very small exceptions. First is a CPI, about 3% CPI increase in costs, general costs. Second is for Quail Hollow and Oak Creek, we're adding street sweeping at the request of the residents there. Third is at Stonegate, we're pulling $40,000 out of the Stonegate CSA reserve to deal with infrastructure issues, primarily water supply issues. Not the water itself, but with the infrastructure that serves it. And lastly, at Cielo Vista, there is a request for a roof replacement on a community building there, a water treatment facility, wastewater treatment facility, that we're going to ask them for a special assessment, not as a part of the regular CSA budget. This is a tile roof in keeping with the architecture in the community. It's a county-owned building, but there are pine trees and other maintenance issues that walk on roof, and we feel that we could replace it with a much more serviceable roof that would potentially not match the architecture of the community so well, and so we're asking the community to chip in for the extra cost of that. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you. When we redid the scope of services and the cost of those services, in fact, before your time, we made a promise to make sure we had a dedicated staff member to the CSAs. Do we have that in place now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great.
Claudette Fay is the staff person. She does a heck of a good job.
Okay, good. That's really important, I think, to this board, that we provide the level of service and customer service that they, these folks deserve.
Claudette does a really good job with the auditing and accounting for all of this. But in addition to that, she's a hammer and nail kind of person, and again, not afraid to get her hands and boots dirty. And she goes out and reads the meters and looks at the problems that there are, and is a really good spokesperson for the department and for the county.
Great. I haven't heard any complaints, so that's good. Thank you,
Only
Mr. Chairman.
compliments, right.
Mr. Chair? Yes, Britton, I think Joe Paul did address that to us. I don't remember, but just to refresh my mind, we are charging the CSAs for her services, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? This time I'll open up to members of the public. Questions or comments? I got a question for you. Mr. Burns.
Marty Richard from Hollister. I wonder if we can get any update on the emergency hookup for the water at Stonegate. As you know, this has been on again, off again issue. Every time it comes up, we're told there's a bunch of water. Then the next time there is no water. There's a emergency hookup. No, there isn't an emergency hookup. Yes, there is one, and it doesn't work. I assume that any capital improvement on that would fall under the CSA budget, the emergency water hookup at Stonegate. I'd like to, not interested in a water report, just kind of a report whether or not this the budgeting for the CSAs has that in there, or is this a solved issue finally and we don't need it anymore? Thank you for your time.
As far as the emergency intertie, that has not been finalized, and I don't know whether it's included in this budget, but I don't believe so.
I don't believe so, no. I don't know the answer specifically. We'll find out.
Any other members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
Good morning, Commissioners. Joe Lee from Ridgemark. I noticed CSA 9 is not included in that list, but in the details of the agenda item.
CSA 9 is one of the AB 8 entities, which CSAs, that means that you get a percentage of the 1% property tax. So the CSAs that were formed before a certain year, when they split up the 1% property tax, they got a dedicated source of funding so that they have the funds and don't need to collect a fee from the property, from the owners. Within those, I think there's 5 CSAs that don't need a special fee or a fee because they already have a dedicated source of funding.
And so the specific CSA that's been questioned is not in.
Yes, they do not. They do not need a special fee, or they do not need a fee or a tax,
Gotcha.
or any sort of dedicated funding because they receive part of the 1%.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Any other questions, comments from members of the public on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for additional questions or for a decision.
Mr. Chair, the comment I have, because I'm I have several CSAs in District 4 that have issues, and I want to first say that Claudette is doing a fantastic job. The problem is she's only half time, and
on this.
Yes, on CSA. She also does other duties for the RMA department. And we probably can't change anything coming year because we've already established our budget, but I think we need to consider looking and making this a full-time position because the workload for her is just, more than what a half-time position can handle. Sure. And there's other issues with staffing, getting jobs done, but I won't go into those at this time. But unfortunately, I feel we are not servicing our CSAs to the level that they should be expecting at this time. And a lot of it is just due to staffing, not that the staff or staffing level, not that the staff is not doing a good job. It's just we don't have enough bodies to take care of the workload that is out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Supervisor
Mr.
Barrios?
Chair. Thank you. In order to do that, I'm not sure that we would have to go through a process because that would increase the cost to the CSA communities. And so it would, have they requested it at this time that they need additional staff that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if
I
Brent's.
just don't want to impose additional costs on them if it isn't something that is absolutely being requested at this time.
We do get a lot of service requests, but the only additional service request specifically this year was for the sweeping in Oak Creek and Quail Hollow.
But not for a person to
Not
address
for an administrative staff.
questions, administrative. So just a concern because I know, like I said, additional cost to the homeowner.
Yes, it's more of a comment. I could be wrong, but I believe this position before the Great Recession was a full-time position, and I'm not sure if we have anybody here to substantiate that, which is not a big issue. Like I said, this was more of a comment because I do get a lot of emails and calls about things falling through the crack. And like I said, it's not a knock on Claudette or anything. It's just I feel we don't have enough
time
bodies to take care of this efficiently.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments? Supervisor Dela Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, Ray or Matt, is there a funding mechanism in which we can increase that position full-time and then share it among all the other CSAs? Can we borrow them? Can we lend them money and then next year when there's a CPI increase, take it off of that? If there is a need for a full-time, can we kind of be creative about a funding mechanism and how we can associate it to the CSAs?
I know that we've done contingency draws in the past, okay, but you just have to make sure that there's enough in the CSA fees to cover that, because on a lot of the CSAs, not all of them, some of the CSAs we're at the maximum fee that we can go up to, but without a new Prop 218. Some of the fees are set lower than the maximum.
Barbara, I'm sorry, excuse me, but don't we have isn't there a 15% admin fee built in?
There is an admin fee percentage built in. And historically, I do not believe it was a permanent full-time position. I believe it was a temporary position.
I don't think you can raise it.
My understanding that it might have been a temporary position without benefits before, even before the recession.
Just a thought.
I guess I'll add in. I don't have the CSAs that Supervisor Munzer has, and I haven't heard any, complaints. But yes, that if we increase the position, it increases costs. And one of the things that we've talked about at LAFCO is that if there was a possibility of combining these CSAs into fewer CSAs, there's quite a number of them out there, and every single one of them is different in scope of services, and to assess the cost to that and translate that into a full-time position, somebody could get the short end of the stick. That's one of the things I think Supervisor Barrios was concerned about, is increasing costs by creating if the work needs to be done, it needs to get done, and I'm completely supportive of making sure these folks are serviced the way they're supposed to. But maybe that is something that we could, going forward, look into how we could combine some of the CSAs in similar scopes and narrow the costs. And one of the things I didn't see in this report, and maybe I overlooked it, is the budgets for each CSA and the reserves that have been accumulated over the years. I think when we set this thing up, we're supposed to have set aside for each CSA for capital reserves and operation reserves, 2 reserves actually. And I kind of am curious how we're doing on that.
If you go to the pages that look like this in the book, there is some fun on some of these on the budget. On page like 514 for Creekside 55. Now that's a very new CSA. It was just formed maybe about a year or 2 ago. So on CSA 55, for example, on page 214, it shows the fund balance assigned and fund balance unassigned. So there are a balance carried forward. So there are some balances in that one on Creekside 55. And you can look on the different budget pages, like right before the...
Okay.
Yeah, it indicates how each of the CSAs is doing. And you can also compare the maximum fee versus the actual fee. So on 54, you can see the maximum fee is the same as the actual fee. So they're up against the maximum because we only had a CPI for the first 5 years. And it's been more than 5 years since most of these CSAs last went through their Prop 218 process. So eventually, over time, they'll all butt up against the maximum fee, and then we'll have to go out for a new Prop 218 for the different CSAs.
Any additional questions, comments from members of the board? If not, we certainly can make a decision. It's noted that it is adoption of a resolution 2016-74.
Mr. Chairman, this is a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, well, yeah, it's a public hearing, but you're asking for an adoption of a resolution.
Absolutely.
Which is resolution 2016-74.
Are we waiting for more public comment, Mr. Chair, or are we done?
No, the public hearing's closed, or.
Yeah. Yeah, he already took one public comment.
Okay. Then I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt per staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. So moving on, we'll go to item 37. It has been requested by staff. Following item 37 will be item 44 out of our Resource Management Agency.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are now at the item with regard to the library. The item you have before you is the response to the RFP that San Benito County issued on behalf of and after extensive discussions by the City of Hollister, City of San Juan Bautista, and County of San Benito intergovernmental committee meeting and discussions. As you all well know, the discussion with regard to a TEL center has been one that has taken place over the course of the last year and actually originated from, in part from the intergovernmental committee discussions. Earlier in the spring of this year, there were discussions by the intergovernmental committee that directed staff here at the county to formulate and issue the RFP. My predecessor, Sarah De Leon, put that together, and that was issued. We received one response to the RFP, and that RFP was responded to by LSSI, Library Systems and Services Incorporated. The issue with regard to the library that relates to the scope is one that deals solely with a needs assessment. And so to be very clear, the scope of the RFP did not ask for recommendations regarding privatization of one or more of any of the operations of that library. It did not request a detailed discussion of any kind regarding cost sharing. It did not outline any of the items with regard to labor or operations of anything of that kind. What it did ask for is for a contractor to come in, a private firm to come in and take a look at the operations of the library as is, and to put together an assessment of the needs that the community has between the city, the county, and all of the other areas affected by it. So I wanted to be very clear that there was no misinformation or misattribution that the county was in the process of or making an effort to privatize any or all of the operations of the library. This is strictly a needs assessment. And to that end, the city, through the city manager's office and through the members of the intergovernmental committee, they have agreed to pay for 1/2 of the cost of the needs assessment should this board proceed to direct staff to award that RFP and that needs assessment to this firm, and to come up with data upon which this board can then make decisions about how to proceed with that TEL center or with that library in whatever form the city and the county may determine is best. So I wanted to be very clear about that we currently do not have a comprehensive set of analytical data or analysis to base these decisions on, and this is the first step towards doing that. So I would like to ask Mr. Bob Windrow from LSSI to come up. He has a PowerPoint presentation that he will give to you, and then after his discussion, we will have further recommendations from the administrative staff. So, Mr. Windrow.
Thank you, Louis. Mr. Chairman, board members, good morning.
Morning.
Let me just get my presentation up here and
There we go.
as Louis mentioned, my name is Bob Windrow. I'm a vice president with Library Systems and Services. I've been with the company for more than 20 years, and I've worked very closely with all our library clients here in California, in Texas, and in Kansas. With me today is Dana Braccia. Dana is our vice president of Library Services, and she works with all our library clients throughout the country. We appreciate the opportunity to present our library needs assessment for a TEL center for San Benito County. With your permission, I would first like to give you a little background on our company, and then I'm going to ask Dana to give you an overview of our proposal. Our company was founded in 1981 by a small group of library professionals that wanted to bring best business practices to the operations of libraries. Today, we have more than 1,000 staff members working in libraries throughout the United States. More than 140 of our staff members have advanced degrees in library science. We have 35 years of experience with working with libraries of all types and sizes, including the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian Institution. Over the years, we have successfully completed dozens of projects for those two prestigious institutions. Today, we partner with 20 local governments in 6 different states for the operations of 82 community libraries. We bring the collective experience of hundreds of top library professionals to this project. You know, every community is different. Each community has its own unique needs for reading, education, and lifelong learning. Our work with libraries across the nation enables us to understand national as well as local trends in library services. We've helped numerous communities throughout the country, large and small, plan new libraries and implement library improvements in their communities. For example, the growing communities of Red Oak and Bee Cave, Texas, which are communities of under 10,000 population, did not have a library. They contracted with our firm to help them plan, design, furnish, and operate their very first community library. In Osceola County, Florida, which is near Orlando, they have 6 branch libraries, and they serve a population of 270,000 people. We've assisted them with several major renovations of their existing branch, and we work with them closely on the planning of a new library facility. The Riverside County Library System serves a population of well over 1 million people. When we started operations in 1997, they had 24 branches and 1 bookmobile. Today they have 35 branches, 2 bookmobiles, and a museum. All of the original 24 branches have either been totally remodeled or replaced with a new, larger facility. They've added 11 new libraries, and several of those new libraries are joint-use facilities with local high school districts. We have the capabilities. We've worked very closely with Riverside County on all those new libraries. We have the capabilities to complete a very thorough needs assessment for your community. I'd like to introduce our team leaders. As I mentioned, Dana is our Vice President of Library Services. She's a former American Library Association Council member. She's a past president of the Mountain Plains Public Library Association. She's taught in the library schools at several major institutions and major universities. And she's experienced in strategic planning, facilities construction, remodels, and service redesign. Barbara Howison has been with the company for 19 years. She's our regional manager and works very closely with Dana in Southern California, covering the libraries that we serve there. She's a Riverside County librarian. She studied planning and design of public libraries at Harvard University's School of Design. She's been actively involved with 20 new library projects in Riverside County, and she is an expert in library building trends. We have two goals for our community needs assessment here in San Benito County. The first is to identify the needs, the community needs, for a TEL Center, which will become a future center that will serve as the hub for the entire community. Once we have a consensus of community needs, and in full recognition that it may take several years to construct a new facility, our second goal is to develop a comprehensive analysis of the unmet needs for both the facility and the operation that can be applied to the existing library facility. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Dana, who is our library champion, and she can tell you about our proposal, or give you more details on it. Thank you.
Good morning. As Bob said, part of what we do when we start with a needs assessment is really looking at what is a community consensus. And I always say libraries are not measured in square feet, they're measured in square miles, meaning we touch beyond our borders of just the building. And so having that chance to have that opportunity for conversation. Our approach is, coming in and first asking and listening, and that involves working with citizens, community stakeholders, our Friends of the Library group, the school district, local businesses and organizations. And then we overlay a little bit more of the analytical or deeper research, and that includes things like focus groups, community surveys. We also apply an analytics tool that looks at behavioral demographics. So not only do you have your census figures where you're looking at age and population, income, things like that we traditionally look at, but also behaviorally. Where are people at in their lifestyle, in their family cycles? How do you help build a little bit stronger community? And I don't know if I'm clicking, but this seems to be clicking ahead on its own here. Also doing on-site assessments. Bob and I have had that opportunity to visit the facility and look at, just again, immediate surrounding areas. And then layered on top of the local, the analytics, we also look at, again, national trends. What's happening with American Library Association? Where do we see library services growing? What kind of new technologies are coming in? Also with groups such as the Aspen Institute. Because, again, it's a lot of major industry initiatives that are happening, and understanding things that may work in this community or things that may not. This would be a 3-phase project. Phase 1 includes reviewing the milestones, meeting with county leadership to ensure we've got a really comprehensive stakeholder list, putting together when the surveys will go out, a lot of the sort of the nuts and bolts and moving parts of this. We do have our information gathering tools. That's something we would work with the project leadership on to ensure, is there anything that we're missing or any other areas that you would like to explore and get a little bit more information on. We also talk about having that data upload from your automation system. And again, that's where we can understand a little bit better how are your current libraries using your facility, where do we see gaps, because again, we have a lot of the folks that don't have library cards or not active, but just as importantly, people that are already invested in the library. We go through, again, the long-term goals and strategies of the community, because I know the library needs assessment isn't a standalone. You know, what other areas may you be trying to grow in terms of economic development, workforce readiness? So we really want to understand some of the larger picture things happening here in the community. Then phase 2 is a lot of that the heavy lifting of the gathering of the data, the conversations that are happening, doing the analytics assessment, bringing that back together, working again with the project leadership on preparing a draft of the report. And then phase 3 is bringing you back with the actual final needs assessment report. So the deliverables, again, include that in-depth assessment, looking at everything from collection and programming, technology, space needs, community engagement, and then part of that gap analysis as well is where you might want to enhance services or things that you can do right now before a TEL center is built. So we look forward to the opportunity to work with you on this project. I mean, this is a wonderful undertaking, I know, for the community, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board at this time?
I have one. Thank you,
Supervisor
Mr.
Barrios?
Chair. To what extent will you be using prior assessments? Because you did identify several that we have done already, and I think that information is important. We don't want to just sweep it under the rug, and it took a lot of time, a lot of effort. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and again, if we don't need to reinvent the wheels in some area, and I think a lot of times those in-depth assessments really do draw out what's a nice base, where are we starting from, and so we would build on those and definitely recognize and acknowledge the work that's already been done.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay. This time I'd like to open up to the public for questions or comments that they may have.
First speaker is Jeffrey Holland.
Good morning. The report that Mr. Espinosa gave you, I think, was very good. And I would like to emphasize that what the gentleman from the company said is not quite the same report. He emphasized a lot of how they were going to implement, or how they have implemented, the programs in these various schools, in these various districts. That's the problem I have. I have looked through this document, which they have shown you a part of, and certainly their needs assessment is excellent, excellent. However, what worries me is that they are the ones who are doing the assessment, and they may asked to be the ones to implement it. That seems to be a conflict of interest to me. You're presenting something, sort of like you're have your car smog thing fixed. They say, no, it has to be done, and we'll do it. Well, that's not quite kosher, I don't think. On the issue of privatization, remember that all of us who are in any kind of government agency, you need to be very concerned about all the people of this community. Privatization has that word profit in it, and I worry that a privatized library would cut out our most needy students, our most needy children. Any cost is too much when you can't pay it. So I would ask you to be very concerned about seeing to it that the profit of a company, not necessarily this one, would not deprive those who simply cannot pay, or ostracize them, label them in any fashion. The library itself did ask for a private factor. What they had in mind, I'm told, is that a coffee shop inside of the library was suggested, and that's what they had in mind. They did not have a gigantic overtake by a big company. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and good luck.
Next speaker is Judy Johnson. Good morning. I'm Judy Johnson, Secretary to the Friends of the Library, Secretary to the Jovenes de Antonio, Jovenes, Secretary to the 4-H Council. Just giving you an idea that I'm kind of involved as a volunteer, as are many of you, because I see you time after time at these same things. The library is exceedingly important. We've been working on a number of projects. If you yourself have not filled out our new tech request, be happy to provide you with one of those, as well as giving them to people in your various districts. Our library is alive, well, and very viable, and we welcome your own participation with us. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Mark Wyrick.
Good morning, members of the board. Mark Wyrick from SEIU. We're very concerned about the county considering doing business with this company, given their track record of offering to take over and privatize libraries at a profit, often at the expense of the community and library employees. And to do business with them for this needs assessment will provide them an opening to argue for and make a sales pitch for to run this library in the future. Their business model is often to privatize and take over libraries in distress, where they often claim to be able to do more with less often being less investments in staff, less investments in programming, less access to materials for the library's collection, etc. In the libraries that they run, they have an incentive to keep costs down and profits up by lowering salary and benefits for library employees, relying on library volunteers for staffing needs, reducing programs and services that are vital to the community, and then profiting from the savings. We want the board to be cautious in doing business with this company. The board needs to be clear from the outset that the task at hand is only to complete a needs assessment, not to provide a means for this company to say that they've assessed what the county needs and what it needs is for them to run this library. We ask that the board remain clear to this company that the county will not consider whatsoever any proposal to having this company privatize and manage its library. Thank you.
Next speaker is Rebecca Salinas.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Rebecca Salinas, Treasurer of the Friends of the Library. I think that the proposal to do the assessment is a very well-written, comprehensive plan. I think we need it. I like that you mentioned that we would keep some of the stuff that we've done before, but you can appreciate our apprehension. You know, these people have very imposing credentials, and they're in the business, and they're coming here. And when you look at the personal end of it, you know, we've got our friends working in the library, we've got our friends coming to the library. It's so at the gut level, it's, you know, we don't want to lose our investment in the library. Now, I, for one, will not volunteer for a for-profit company. It may be, you know, when we talk about the Tell Center, I think that's the way we should go. And I'm very happy that you have undertaken this big problem of the library, because it's been on your backs for years and years and years. So I really congratulate you for taking it on. But I want you to appreciate the apprehension that we feel. And I'm sure these people do a great job assessment, but keep your eye on them. Thank you.
Next speaker is Marty Richmond.
Good morning again, Marty Richmond from Hollister. I'd like to think I was instrumental in getting at least a needs assessment done. And the reason is I did some lifting, some heavy lifting, and I looked 16 years ago. The state of California ran a library bond where they paid for 2/3 of the new libraries. There were 40-something libraries built, or major construction done on 40-something libraries, bigger than ours, same size as ours, smaller than ours. We didn't even apply. We didn't even apply. We couldn't get off our backsides and ask them to give us $2 for every buck we put in. That's the kind of action we've been getting. So I got angry about it, and I looked at those winning applications. The winning applications all had needs assessments, and they were almost all done by third parties, because the state tends to believe third-party needs assessments, not needs assessments done internally or by somebody who has an axe to grind somewhere. So they like third-party ones, and they have all kinds of silly rules, like we like our libraries on a major street so we can see where the money goes, and we like our libraries here, and we like them look like this, and so on and so forth, some of which make no sense at all, but they're the guys with the bucks. Now, we need this needs assessment for several reasons. One is to get this program off the ground, because you guys, and between you and the city, have been going nowhere. The city puts in a measly $15,000 a year, less than a few cents a resident, and you've been putting in whatever you can, $780,000 or $800,000 a year, and between both of them, that hardly keeps that thing running, and we're out of space, and we got all kinds of issues about having more stuff. Fortunately, the librarian and the staff has been able to get some grants and move along, but this is not the library we need for this community. If we shut down every for-profit outfit working in Silicon Valley, half the people, or maybe three-quarters of the people who live here, wouldn't have anywhere to work. So I'm not going to hold it against anybody for working for a profit. I worked for a private company for 25 years, and it was just fine. I worked for the public for 25 years, and that was just fine. But I'm going to tell you this. The kids that are in school here now are going to need a job someday. And if they don't have a library, and they don't have a good education, and we don't have our community college here, as you well know, I've spoken on that many times, they're going to have a tough time getting a good job. And you know, this nation and the world is splitting along two lines. The educated, which are valuable to society, whether you like it or not, and the uneducated, which wind up hauling the trash. And that's the way it is. And you know, the educated make more money, have a better life, have more opportunities. The uneducated make less money, have a worse life, and have fewer opportunities. Thank you very much.
Any other member from the public wishing to speak on this item? Now is the time to do so. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and staff.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think Mr. Richmond hit the nail right on the head. The library is the center of knowledge in any community, and knowledge revolves around that place as well as these schools. And one of the things that we are trying to accomplish with this needs assessment is, I'm going to allude back to something Supervisor Botello said, we need to listen to the constituents of our community. And the constituents of this community are telling us to look inward, to identify opportunities, to build efficiencies into our finances and into our operations, and to get data that is reliable to make good, solid decisions so that we can make sure we're making the best possible expenditure per penny of the tax dollar that they're giving us. For me, when I went to school, librarians were central to my education and learning, and they need to be for a community like San Benito, because we are in the shadow of Silicon Valley, and we need to have well-prepared and well-educated students who will go into the economy and into the country to be leaders in their own respects. Now, with regard to the conflict of interest issue, I want to knock that down right away, because this was the only company that responded to the RFP. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they are, if not the only, one of the very few companies who actually do this sort of thing for libraries across the country. That's number one. Number two, yes, sir.
To hit you right at mid-sentence here, I apologize, yes, but the question I had was specific to what you just said.
Yes.
The only respondent to this RFP has been LSSI.
The only respondent, Mr. Chairman, has been this company, yes.
And we're talking about purely a needs assessment.
We're talking purely about a needs assessment.
We are not bound to any of its recommendations.
No, sir, we are. The board is not bound to do that. Okay? And that's a very important point, because if you have a specialized company that needs to address a specialized need doing that, then they have to have some credibility in the kind of information and the kind of recommendations they're going to make. We haven't crossed those bridges, if you will, about moving forward beyond the needs assessment, because we don't know what they're going to say at this point. So they're almost a sole source provider in that regard. You know, we issued the RFP. It was on the street for at least a couple of months, and they were the only folks who responded. So it's really important to have that understanding. And I think it's very important for the board to also be aware that this particular company, as I indicated before, is experienced across the country, but specifically in the state of California. So they are aware of the issues that surround this kind of needs assessment and these kinds of library operations in the state of California.
Okay. This time, are there any questions from members of the board?
I have just a comment,
Vice
Mr.
Myers?
Chair. I really appreciate the concern that the community has, and that's exactly what we want to hear, because they want to get the best
Absolutely.
for their investment as well. So I think we do need to proceed with caution. I think this is an excellent company. The report was very comprehensive. I think that there's a lot of experience there that we can benefit from. But proceeding with caution, making sure that we're getting what we're paying for, and that is the scope of work that we're requesting is the needs assessment. That's it. If they come back with recommendations, then that's for another day. Then we bring back the community, decide where we want to go with those, and move on. Keeping in mind always our community, our volunteers, and our investment that we've already made. Thank you.
Sorry, Delacruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Louis, the funds have been used, right? No dollars have been incurred as of today, right?
No, sir, they have not.
And so the decision you're asking us is to, one, do we move forward with the needs assessments? And two, because this is the only group that submitted an application, do we build a relationship with them and have them doing the needs assessment?
That is correct, sir.
And then three, at the end of that report, or whatever the result is of that report, they'll come back to the board. And obviously, in between those two time periods, there'll be a lot of public input and a lot of discussion within the community, what direction or what other needs are, right? And inclusive of all the other reports that have been done already.
That is correct. Extensive community engagement is the absolute key to make this work. We are being careful by having issued this RFP.
All right,
if we dove in right into trying to do something, then that would not have been prudent. This is being careful. This is being considerate of that. Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you.
Supervisor Patello?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Valdez, for bringing this report and this item forward. And, you know, from my perspective, just being one supervisor, I've had conversations with our librarian and different people in the community, as well as employees, and it's just flat out, I'm against privatizing our library under any circumstances. I won't be supporting any of that. But I'm very supportive of doing a needs assessment. I think you know, if there is some funding or that's be available at the state level, or even if we're go out to our own community, we have to have an idea of what we want and what our goals are, and without a plan and what our library could be in the future or what needs to be in the future, it's pretty hard to ask for money. And there's more than one reason why you go outside to get a consultant to do this work. Our staff is, you know, very minimal in numbers, and we have a lot of projects out there. We're working on a jail. We're trying to build a fire station. We're doing a homeless center, among just day-to-day operations. And this is a needed report. So, you know, we got to keep moving forward with those items too. The second thing that I think we have to, once we have a needs assessment and what we could do in our community, is find out how we could develop some sort of revenue stream to properly fund the library. That's a major handicap. If you don't have any money, it's pretty hard to meet the needs no matter what. And which brings us to the next point that I have is we have to develop a better working relationship with our partners. I know the Intergovernmental Committee, before I was on there, pushed this idea and got a commitment from the City of Hollister to help fund this effort. After this, hopefully, we're able to persuade them that we need them to adopt impact fees. We need to get more of a working partnership for day-to-day operations as we go forward for a new facility, and that includes the education community as well. So, but it begins with the needs assessment. So So thank you.
Supervisor Munzer, do you have anything? No? Okay. Yeah, I can only speak more of the same. I think that, obviously we appreciate hearing from our local union and from our residents. And certainly we're not bound by anything. I heard rumors out there that we're privatizing, we're for profit, and it seemed like the people that were talking to me knew more about it than I did. Because you guys actually did. It was, obviously it was all rumors, and and some people take things out of context. But this certainly is something I think that we need. It's unfortunate that we only had one respondent, but certainly moving forward, I think that the assessment is necessary because for me, it's about our service there at the library. I think we all know that our facilities are outdated. That we would need to improve our facilities. We need an educational center here in San Mateo County. That's going to serve, our local residents. But for me, it's about our service. We're bound to this building and the structure that we're in, and I think that this assessment is going to go a long way to tell us and to provide us with this information on how we can make our library stronger. What are the hours of the library? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, they are. I'm not off the top of my head aware, but I think one of the areas that's of concern is they're not necessarily open all weekend. I think
We're
they're not
open on the
weekends.
weekend, and that's a huge concern. I know
Right.
that this board has addressed it. Hey, can we flex these hours at the library to try to be open on the weekend to make it more accessible to students and to our general public? We have a lot of issues that we need to address, and this assessment hopefully will provide us with this overview on how we can come together, maybe through working with the city, and how we could actually get our library, get our library on the right track.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Supervisor De La Cruz hit it on the head. It's a question of fairness. What are the needs? There are a lot of college students out there, a lot of high school students out there. On Saturdays, I remember I used to like to get up. I didn't like to get up, but I'd get up and go to the library and study on Saturdays. And I want to be very clear about something else that one of the speakers said. No, we are not putting a Starbucks in the libraries, okay, or an Estee Lauder like they have at some of the universities. I heard a couple of those crazy things. I don't know why you'd have an Estee Lauder in the library, but none of that is happening. We're simply doing a needs assessment. So we want to be very careful about that.
And so, as my final comments, I believe that a needs assessment is absolutely necessary because this could help us establish partnerships beyond just with the city of Hollister, but we could reach out to our local ag businesses. We could reach out to local colleges to see if, they could help support this concept and this need in our community to make it a very, to make the library stronger. And to make this really, a piece of our community that we can all be proud of.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you for that. And so next steps, as far as will this be coming back for us?
So what we're asking the board to do is to award the RFP for the needs assessment to LSSI, and that once the needs assessment has been completed, that they come back to the board and provide a full report.
Do we need a formal recommendation to... is that a different agenda item?
Well, yeah, that'd probably be good. The very last sentence there, I was working with legal on this, considering available options by the Board of Supervisors, including entering into a contract with LSSI. So that would be one of your options.
One of our options.
Yeah.
Okay. Instruct staff to pursue the contract with LSSI. Then it would have to be brought back for the board's approval and signature at some future agenda.
RFP. Okay, so is it the wish of the board to bring this back?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, just a real simple question. I know it'll be taking one of the options out of the array of options, but Supervisor Botello mentioned about the county will not outsource the library. Can we include that in that direction that when they do the needs assessments, not to wonder in that section, but to wonder on the needs that we have in our community? I think that's very important right from the get-go. That is, the intention is not to outsource, but the intention is to do a needs assessment of the community and build the foundation blocks of the big ideas, the TAL Center, the education centers, the partnerships that we can have in our community. Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Chair, I agree, but I think that that is going to be the scope of work.
It's
The
exactly
needs
my point.
assessment is going to be very clear, and I think there will be no doubt when that comes back to us.
So to answer Mr. De La Cruz's question, if the needs assessment comes back and says there is a very specialized piece of work, the architecture work on the TEL Center, if you will, that comes back, well, we don't have an architect on staff. That's going to have to be privatized. That's going to have to go to a private firm to do. But I mean, there's a distinction to be made between what they will say and what we expect for them to say, and we don't know what that is at this point. So, do you want to chime in on that?
We already had this discussion. In part, is that we indicated that we expect any proposal that they put forth at some point in the future to be separate and apart from this needs assessment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm good.
Okay. So the wishes of the board?
I would like to make a recommendation and go ahead and direct staff to prepare a contract with our only, applicant, I guess you would call him, LSSI.
Respondent.
Respondent
Okay.
for the needs assessment request.
And I would like to add, Mr. Chair and Supervisor Barrios, that the City of Hollister has agreed to, and that they will pay for one half of the cost of the needs assessment.
Okay, and we can make that clear in my, I can make that in my recommendation that the City of Hollister will be responsible for half, 50% of the cost.
Yes.
Can we, this is a question for staff, can we expect this item to be on our next agenda, our next meeting?
I think we probably could work something out,
September 13th?
yeah. September 13th.
But that's my motion, Mr. Chair, but I just want to add to that we need to move forward. This is a dream for San Benito County. This is a vision, and the only way that we're going to get there is if we take the first step.
Sure.
So, thank you.
On that note, Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion and second. All in favor?
And a point of discussion. One of the reasons why we have some money in the bank for Parks and Rec is because we had a parks plan. And I think that's, without a plan, we can't look for additional funds. So, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to item 44. This is out of the Resource Management Agency.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me while I multitask here for just a moment. So this is also a needs assessment, but we're at the other end of the project. Several months ago, your board authorized us to enter into a contract with Pavement Engineering, Inc., PEI for short, rolls off the tongue a little better, to do an assessment of roadway conditions, asphalt pavement conditions throughout the county. Today we have the results of that study for you. The consultant is here. I will let them introduce themselves. But sorry, I'm not multitasking. Shame on me. San Benito presentation. Okay, it's now on the desktop. So there'll be the presentation will consist of what I call Pavement 101, which will let you understand a bit of the engineering details behind the study, and then we'll also present the results as they pertain to San Benito County. I want to warn you that the presentation is rated R. The results are not very cheery, but I will let the consultant deliver that news. You're up.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and Brent, I've never had a rating put on our presentations before, so I hope that didn't scare too many people. Anyway, my name is Joe Ryrie. I'm with Pavement Engineering, and I brought with me today Jacob Seeley and David Tran, who were out doing the assessment. I always feel it's really good for the people who do the work get to see the end result of what happens. It helps tie everything together. Pavement Engineering is a civil engineering firm. We specialize in pavement and have done that for 30 years. We've worked throughout the state of California, and we specialize in doing needs assessments for pavement. We put together pavement management system plans. We do designs, and we also get involved in the testing and inspection to make sure that what was specified was done properly. This afternoon or today, we're going to review what the needs assessment was, and as Brent mentioned, we have a few goals that we wanted to review today. We wanted to go over a Pavement 101 course just to make sure we're all on the same page. I find that when we do that, we're able to actually communicate a little bit better and understand what really needs to happen as a result of the needs assessment. We're going to talk about some basic pavement preservation principles, as well as treatments and and then we're going to get into the assessment and talk about the budgeting impacts that we have, as well as we want to provide some recommendations for your consideration in moving forward and what to do with the information. So, Pavement 101, it's like going back to school. Pavement engineering or pavement design and the actual pavement structure is really a component of looking at what's happening on top of the pavement as well as what's underneath the pavement. If you have poor subgrade soils and you have heavy loads, you need a thicker section to be able to bridge be able to provide a structure to be able to support the loading. When pavement deteriorates, and we're talking about asphalt pavement, which is predominantly what your county has, it deteriorates very interestingly. It'll go along and look like it's going just fine, and then it reaches a point and will deteriorate very fast. And that's why when you drive on a road, you'll drive down it and go, boy, I don't ever remember this road looking this bad. When did it get bad? And that's because it hit that part of the curve and fell off quickly. You'll notice that we provide 3 different curves up here because the deterioration rate depends on how the road is used, what climate conditions there are, how it was originally constructed. All of those different things factor into how does the pavement deteriorate over the long cycle. But it will follow that pattern. Will look good for a while, it'll fall off very quickly and show a deterioration that way. So asphalt pavement deteriorates 2 different ways. One is from environmental distresses or the environmental effects of the sun and the water oxidizing the binder that holds together the aggregate. So we take oil and we glue it together with we glue the aggregate together with the oil, and that's what holds our pavement together. As it ages and as it's introduced to water and the sun, that binder begins to get brittle. It age hardens and begins to crack. The other way that pavements deteriorate is from heavy wheel loads. So when we talked about the impact of the sun and the water, as the binder itself begins to get age hardened, it will exhibit certain different types of distresses that you can look at it and say, oh, these are environmental distresses. My pavement is deteriorating from the environmental effects. And then that guides you into knowing what to do to be able to preserve your pavement. The impact of heavy loads is very interesting. To really be able to help people wrap their head around it, there's a lot of engineering equations that go into the design of a road, but we developed this simple graph to be able to demonstrate what happens with different types of loading of vehicles and what it actually means. So we took, and to give you an idea of how old this is, you read on the very bottom up here, and it says a Chevy S10 Blazer. If you remember what those looked like way back when, we took a Chevy S10 Blazer and we took it to a weigh scale, and we actually weighed the axles on it. And then we equated that Chevy S10 Blazer to different types of vehicles, heavy vehicles, 2-axle trucks, 3-axle trucks. What does it mean in terms of buses? What does it mean in terms of garbage trucks? And what does it mean in terms of 5-axle trucks? So we weighed all of these, we equated it all together, and so we came up with the Chevy S10 Blazer unit. A 2-axle truck weighs as much as 442 Chevy S10 Blazer units. One fully loaded 5-axle truck that's delivering to the local grocery store, when it's fully loaded, is equal to almost 15,000 Chevy S10 Blazer units. A huge difference. So when it comes to pavement, it's not necessarily about the busyness of the road. It's really how is the road being used and what kind of traffic is it trying to support. One thing that we should probably comment on is the garbage trucks. You know, just recently we're now asking for our garbage trucks to recycle and green waste and paper waste and all of those different things. We're separating it out, and so now we have 3 trucks driving on our roads. The roads were designed before that criteria was put into it. So the way you think about heavy loads is you think about it, the easiest way to think about it is think about it as a bank account. And when we design the road, we put into the pavement so much of this different type of loading conditions. And each time a heavy vehicle drives over that, it's like a withdrawal from the bank account. And the heavier the truck is, the larger the withdrawal is. Does that make sense? I forgot to say that I like questions during the middle of this, and so if you have a question specific to what we're talking about, I would love to be able to entertain it as we move along. So we were contracted to go out and determine what the Pavement Condition Index, or PCI, is of all of your county roads. And this is not a new procedure. It's something that's been done since World War II, when the Army Corps of Engineers developed a method for being able to determine what the pavement condition was. We use that exact same system and have for years in California to be able to communicate and report back on the conditions of the road. The different types of distresses that we looked at were alligator cracking and block cracking and longitudinal, and we looked at weathering, and all of these were measured and quantified and entered into the program, and then the program calculated the pavement condition index. These are pictures of some of the different types of distresses that we saw out on your county roads. Over on this side, my right, we'll start there, is a picture of weathering and raveling. That distress is just simply the fines of that asphalt structure beginning to wash off. The pavement, the aggregate that we use is made up of lots of different size aggregates, large and small, but as it begins to wear and it begins to get oxidized, the fines start to fall off and actually rub off as the traffic is driving on it or as the water washes it off, and it begins to look rough. And that condition is called weathering or raveling. The second slide, or the second picture, shows transverse and longitudinal cracking. When pavement is actually constructed, we have paving joints that have to happen out there, and those paving joints are weak places, and as the pavement begins to shrink just a little bit, it'll crack at the paving joints. And the same is true with the transverse joints. Unlike regular concrete, where we actually score into the wet concrete control joints where we tell the pavement where it needs to crack, you can't do that with asphalt. And so it actually will begin to crack in different places out there, and it will be kind of random. The next slide over is block shrinkage cracking. And what's really interesting is as pavements deteriorate, the sun bakes out the volatiles, so the volume gets just a little bit smaller. And that's where the cracking starts to happen. And that block cracking begins, and it'll be a 20 by 20 square. and then it will break down into a 10 by 10 square, and then it keeps breaking smaller and smaller. And as you drive down the roads, you'll actually see about every 20 feet, and in both directions, that kind of cracking condition on your asphalt roads. Those first three distresses are all environmental distresses, which means that if you build a road and no one ever drives on it, those same conditions are going to happen no matter what, because they're environmental. Sun and the water oxidizing the binder. The fourth slide is alligator cracking. That's probably the most common type of load-related distress that is observable on a pavement. As the pavement is driven on and it begins to flex, that the pavement will actually begin to crack in an alligator type of a format or condition. Most of the time it's concentrated in the wheel paths, which makes sense because that's where the load is being carried. So these are the different kinds of distresses that you can observe out there and that we measured. So let's talk about the Pavement Condition Index, or the PCI, just to get an idea of the range, because the range goes from 100 down to 0, and we've got some examples of different types of pavements that fall into different types of categories or different PCIs, just so you know. So when a road is brand new, just been constructed or overlaid, it has a PCI of 100. No distresses. Okay, what did I do? Hang on. Keep clicking the button. There it is. Over time, the weathering and raveling will happen, and so it's actually, this is a pavement that's 85. But that's the only type of distress that we see, is weathering and raveling. It's still considered a good pavement. Over time, the cracks begin to form, and you'll see right down where the stripe is, you can see some cracking down the middle. That's the longitudinal cracking, and then off to the side, some transverse cracking. So this is a PCI of 70. I want you to really look at this slide at 70, because California, if you talk to people who manage pavements, will say that 70 is what their ideal goal is for their total system for their pavements. So this is kind of like what they're hoping their pavements would all be, plus or minus. This is 60. So we're starting to see a lot more different types of cracking. In the corners of the block cracking, as alligator cracking is beginning to form, and therefore we have more distresses that are happening. Here we are at 51, and you can start to see much more alligator cracking beginning to form on those pavements. Here's a 38. This is one you want to pay attention to. Lots of different types of distresses. And then this is a 28, and if we had time, we could have a lot of fun talking about what the difference is in terms of what you see here. I would just comment that on the left side of the screen, the distresses are much more prevalent. You can see them, probably indicating that heavier truck traffic and or a bus route that is taking some kind of a loop is probably on that side of the road much more than on the pavement on the right side. So all of these different things make pavement a really fun topic to discuss. And then, of course, this reminds us why we even have pavements in the first place.
I should have put a label up there that said the 4th
South
District.
County.
Yeah.
That's in a Come on. That's a Romus road.
Okay, there you go. We just need to change out the vehicle, right? Okay. That levity slide worked just great. We got a little humor in there, and we can keep going. Let's talk about pavement preservations and some different types of principles related to pavement preservation. So pavement preservation is simply doing the right treatment to the right pavement at the right time and using the right materials while you do that. So how does that apply to our deterioration curve? Well, it just simply means that we need to recognize that there's different times in a pavement's deterioration process that you're going to be applying different types of treatments. When the pavement is in good condition, you apply treatments like crack sealing and slurry sealing. When pavements are in really bad condition, then you have to deal with major heavy overlays and reconstructs in order to be able to deal with it. To illustrate...
I
yes.
do have a question for you.
Sure.
Why didn't you put the numbers on the horizontal line as far as the 100 and then work your way down 70, 80, 50 as far as, and then you go across, you know, the...
Oh, to be able to see where those trigger points are?
Right.
That's a great question. I did that so that we could talk more about kind of the bigger picture of this. And actually what we've done with county staff is gotten in and set those break points so that the right treatments are called out at the right time. But for you, I thought you would want to see that was the approach that we were taking, and that there's different points along that curve that we do different things.
All right, thank you.
No, but that's a great question. So when we talk about doing the right thing at the right time, obviously we're not going to take a treatment like crack sealing and go out and take a road that really needs to be reconstructed and put crack seal all over it. It's not cost effective. Conversely, we're not going to take a good road and reconstruct it. And so that's kind of a really crazy example, but the point is we want to do the right thing at the right time. So over the years, there's really only 3 ways that I can think of, or that we've come up with, for managing pavements. One is taking a best first or top-down type of design. So you take all of your PCIs, you group them together, you sort them based on the best PCI all the way down to the worst PCI, and then best first just means we're going to keep spending all of our money on the best pavements, and we're not going to deal with the worst pavements. That's just a strategy. It's not sustainable. Over time, you'll end up with a whole bunch of good pavements and a whole bunch of bad pavements, because everything that you're not touching is continuing to deteriorate. The other way that you could deal with it is a worse first or bottom up type of a management approach. So you sort your pavements, except you switch it around the other way and you put your lowest PCIs on the top of your list, and then you start spending all of your money on those pavements. The problem with that is that pretty soon you're spending all of your money on the worst pavements, because everything continues to deteriorate. So that just means that all of your approach is on the worst. And the best way to handle it is what I call critical point management. Critical point management is best illustrated by this slide, which actually shows some break points and some trigger points. But on the upper end of the deterioration curve, any kind of treatment that you apply is only just pennies per square foot that you would be spending on that pavement. As you work your way down the list, getting down to the bottom, the most expensive treatments are the ones that you have to apply to your worst roads. And so the idea is trying to catch your pavements right before they drop into that next treatment category. And so you try and catch them right before they go from being just pennies per square foot to many pennies per square foot. Your pavement management system will allow you to be able to identify all of those roads. If you only had 2 or 3 roads, you could keep track of that in your head. But since you have hundreds of miles of roads, it's just too hard to keep track of all of that. So this is kind of a busy slide, but it is a powerful slide in terms of the upper part of the graph shows a critical point management type of an approach. You wait till you get to a trigger point, you apply that treatment, the treatment goes up, and then it deteriorates again, and it keeps following that pattern until you finally get to where you need to do an overlay or some type of a more aggressive type of a treatment. versus just waiting for your pavement to get to a point where you have to do an overlay every time and that's all you're going to do. If you compare the cost of those two approaches over the same period of time, you'll end up spending half as much money keeping your pavements in good working condition as you would as opposed to spending all your money on just overlaying your pavements. It's really kind of a powerful slide to show that pavement preservation and applying pavement preservation type principles to your pavement management system will actually save money over time. So let's talk about pavement treatments. I think we've talked about this. There's different types of treatments that you do at different types of points along the deterioration curve. Crack sealing is just that. You're identifying the cracks, you're cleaning the cracks out, and you're putting some kind of a crack filler into that crack. Again, the goal is keep the water out of the structure. That's where the problems occur. So you'll put this on there. It's probably the single most cost-effective treatment that you can apply. The problem is, as soon as your street is crack sealed, you'll get calls. My street looks terrible, because now you've accentuated every single crack in the whole street. And so your comeback needs to be, yes, but understand, we've sealed it, and we've kept the water out of it, and we've preserved its life. We're giving it more time to be able to serve.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
When you do that, I mean, is that done by a person or is that done by a machine? Because it would make more sense to just do a complete overlay instead of taking individual cracks, because you know if that's cracking there, it's going to crack elsewhere soon. So what is the rationale?
I really like the way you're thinking about that. What happens is the pavement continues to deteriorate, more and more cracks will happen, and so part of the assessment is you're looking at it saying, you know what, there's too many cracks here to be able to cost effectively do a crack sealing treatment, and we need to be more aggressive with the treatment. In other words, it's fallen below that trigger point.
You would do a complete seal on the whole street rather
Yes.
than just taking the cracks.
Exactly. There gets to be a point where it's no longer cost effective to do that type of a treatment. But when your dollars are limited and you've got to try and hold your streets together, this is a cost-effective way of working with that. So let's talk about slurry seals. Slurry seals are simply putting on a surface treatment over. It's not an overlay. It's a very thin layer of aggregate and oil that you use to be able to cover the main structure of the road. So when you put this on, the best analogy I can think of is it's like sunscreen. When we put sunscreen on before we go outside, you're protecting that existing pavement structure from the oxidizing effects of the ultraviolet rays of the sun and the water, and providing a new wearing surface. Cape seals, again, we're going further down that curve. If there's too much cracking going on, then we need to get more aggressive. And a cape seal is a chip seal with a slurry seal on top of it. And so that's an option that you can look at. Sometimes the pavements just deteriorate in a localized spot, and you need to deal with a localized repair, such as a dig out or a patch. Eventually you get to the point where you have to overlay the pavement. There's different ways to be able to approach rehabilitation or overlays. You might have to mill and fill the street, or you might actually have to do a full reconstruct. One thing to keep in mind is that there are options out there to do value engineering on the approach, and instead of just saying I need to remove the whole street and put a brand new street back, you can pulverize it in place, and then put a new surface on top of it. Or you can stabilize the subgrade by doing some type of a full depth reclamation, lime treatment or cement treatment to be able to hold it together. Those last two treatments we talked about cost about as much as an overlay, a little bit more, and will give you a 20-year life out of a pavement. They're very cost effective. So let's talk about your assessment and what we found out there. You have almost 338 centerline miles. A centerline mile means that that's right down the center of the street, whether it has 2 lanes, 4 lanes, whatever, it's down the center of the street. Lane miles, you have 675 lane miles. A total of 39 million square feet of pavement. If you were to try and replace all of the roads in the county right now, it would cost you $389 million. So your road asset is $389 million. That's the replacement cost. Your total system average, all things considered, is a 37. Remember that slide where I said it was a 38? Pay attention to it. This is why. Because on average, this is where your pavement is. So I get to be the messenger now, so you'll shoot me and not Brent.
I thought we hired you to tell us that our roads are good.
Oh, I missed that part of the memo.
You didn't get that memo.
Anyway, well, just keep in mind that to be an average of 37, that means some roads have to be better than a 37.
Yeah, there we
My
go.
road.
If you take South County out of it, what's the average then?
Yes, exactly. Okay. 70 is the PCI goal. Just to give you perspective, you're not alone in really what you're struggling with. California has put together a statewide needs assessment for several years. Since 2008, we've been trying to track what's going on with our pavements in an effort to make people aware that the funding that's going to pavements is not sufficient to be able to address the need. On the left side of the slide is 2008. Green means that it's in good condition, so those counties are in good condition. Blue means that they're in fair condition, and then green means that they're into the poor, or sorry, red means that they're in poor condition. And then you compare 2008 to 2014, so only 6 years later, you can see a lot more blue and a lot more red starting to appear. So California as a state is not winning the battle with our pavements overall. For you specifically, we identified some neighboring counties that you could take a look at. So you're at a 37, Monterey is at a 50, Merced's at a 58, and another bordering county is at a 68, and that's Santa Clara County. This is how your PCI breaks down for every 10 points along there. Oh, and the cell value didn't show up in here, so we have a glitch. Look at the bars there. You're seeing that most of your pavements are down in the 40, 30, and 20 range, and that's where predominantly the struggles are. This is how your system breaks down in terms of maintained road system. Your arterials make up 43 centerline miles of your total 300 and something miles. They're at an average of a 46. Your collectors and locals are each at a 33. Now, that's actually a bit of good news. The trend, I like to see that trend. Your arterials are your most used streets. And so to have them in better condition is definitely something that you want to try and strive to do, is keep your most used streets in getting the money. Okay. This is a 10-year projection, and we ran several different scenarios just to kind of get an idea of what was going on. So the blue line is an unconstrained budget. We have all the money in the world, so let's put it to our pavements. Your system really wants to be at about an 87, is what that's telling us, and it would get there in about 5 years if you wanted to spend all the money that you could. Average cost of that is $35 million a year. So you're looking at spending $350 million over 10 years which if you remember your asset cost for your total system, basically you're replacing your whole system is what this is trying to tell you to do, which makes sense given the condition of the roads. To maintain your system at a 37 requires $12 million a year. Just to even increase it by 5 points, it would take $15 million a year. Doing nothing to your road system, spending no money at all, would give you a 7 PCI at the end of 10 years. Doing the projected budget that you have right now, your $500,000, will get you at an 8 in 10 years. Those two lines are basically right on top of each other. And I understand we applied all $500,000 going to your roads, but as I understand it, some of that money is actually going to your landscape improvements and maintenance that's happening out there. So it's really not a full $500,000.
Can you go back to that when I have a question? The dollars in parentheses is the cost at that. What is the dollar in parentheses? Like $1, $4, $2? What are you trying to tell us with that?
With this particular graph, we're trying to show that in order to how much money the county needs to allocate towards achieving certain goals with their pavements. And so what you see in the parenthesis part, you mean where you're saying where you see like an S1 in there? That's simply just the scenario.
I thought it was the dollar sign.
No, I'm sorry. It's we should blow that up a little bit bigger. That's talking about scenario 1,
Got it. Okay.
which was an unconstrained budget.
Got it. I thought it was a dollar sign. Sorry.
Yep. So the dollar signs are the average dollars spent per year.
Okay.
This is what the funded versus deferred costs would be, and over time, your deferred cost over 10 years will be in the range of about $450 million for road maintenance that you've deferred. So here's, that was the really bleak part, and I'm waiting for the trap door to open up underneath the little rostrum stand here. But here's my recommendations. Knowing that you have limited budget, here's some things that you need to consider. Do your crack sealing. Get out there, devote, whether it's staff time or contract time, it's the cheapest thing that you can do to help hold your pavements together. Expand and really consider trying to keep being able to apply pavement preservation principles out there. Fight the urge to always just deal with the worst first streets out there where you're getting the most calls and you're getting the complaints. Try and preserve the assets that are still in decent condition right now. My understanding is that you have a trench cut guideline, which simply is as if a utility company comes in or someone comes in and cuts your street, that there's an implied cost to that you can get out of them. Make it an actual ordinance. Give staff some teeth to be able to implement that. There's a whole nother discussion that we could have with the impacts of utility trenches in pavement. Studies have shown that anywhere from 15 to 40% of the service life is consumed by trench cuts. So that can be pretty significant, and hence that's why you want to be able to, and I get it, the lines break, you've got to get in there and fix it, but if they're going through an important asset that you have, and there needs to be a compensation for it. I would strongly consider that you develop a 5-year plan. Think about which streets you're going to focus on. Think about the money that you're going to put to them. Think about the treatments that you want to try and apply. Where I've seen 5-year plans put together and embraced by everybody, frees up a lot of indecision and allows you to be able to communicate much better with constituents when they call and say, when is my street going to get done? hopefully that's showing up on a list somewhere. The other thing that allows your staff to do is plan quickly when the pavements, when the projects will go out. Part of pavement management systems is making sure that you're bidding out your projects at the most cost-effective time of the year. Contractors get worried during the winter time. What am I going to be doing when paving season comes around? If you can put your package in front of them during the winter months, you'll get better prices because they want to fill up your board or their boards. If you send it out in September or October, they're busy, they're tired, and they're gonna put all kinds of extra markups in that. So again, that's part of the strategy that you need to be able to do. A 5-year plan allows your staff to be able to focus on getting those projects out in a timely fashion. We talked about preserving critical assets. Really consider what are our most important streets and how are they being used, and let's figure out how to keep them going. There's been interesting studies, one that was done after Hurricane Katrina, where they found that the economy didn't come back and get vibrant and strong in the area until the arterials were cleared off and functioning. And so consider that when you're thinking about which roads you need to really focus on. You need to find some additional monies out there, and so the last 2 points are really towards that. Leveraging limited funds with grants and being willing to pay $1 to get $2 from a grant resource. Being willing to actually focus staff on looking for grants or perhaps getting them the help that they need to be able to find grants. There's lots of money out there. You just have to get creative in terms of what you can do. And then consider additional funding sources, and instead of going after, this would be like if you've got a truck route in town and perhaps there might be a certain business that is the one who's using or putting their heavy trucks on there. Is there some way that you can partner with them to have them share in the cost of the life that they're consuming from the road? The other part might be partnering together with a utility company, and if they're going to come in and do some type of an improvement, I've seen cities partner with them and say, well, do you just provide the trench, give us the money that you would provide for the top part, the asphalt part, and we'll apply that to our road budget and take that road, and instead of getting half of it paved, we're going to get all of it paved. And so they share funds back and forth like that. So there's ways to be able to do that. And now we're to the questions.
Thank you for that comprehensive report. Are there any questions at this time from board members?
I just have one question. In your report, we saw it's a general over number. Do you have the breakdown for each road condition? And that would be interesting to have at some point in time.
Yeah, that's all contained in here.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to have it in this presentation, Ed.
We not only do we have the database, but we have a map.
Okay.
The map is it's a PDF actually. If you want to just pass it around and have a look at it, we can do that, and then we'll make an electronic version of it available as well.
Yeah, if you have an electronic version for the public, that would be probably helpful.
Okay, what I would like to do at this time is open up for comments from the public.
Sure. Let me add just one brief thing. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was really good. I hope your eyes didn't glaze over too much. There's one recommendation that Joe did not put onto his list, and that is staffing the effort. That's not really his purview. As you know, we have a total of 3 professional positions in the Public Works office. And so all of those are good suggestions, but if we can't manage the grants and manage the funds and manage the database, it's all for naught. I'm not asking you for more staff or more money. We're going to come back with a strategic plan that addresses the recommendations that were put on the screen and very specific roadway segments, and essentially create the 5-year plan. This is an information item today, and we'll come back and work with you to assess the priorities, countywide and district by district, and see if we can hammer out a very detailed, specific approach over the next several years.
Can you do them by district number, like I'm District 1, so you start with 1?
Makes perfect sense. And B for Barrios, I think that's, you got 2 hits there.
You know, I don't got many county roads, so I'm willing to negotiate some concessions with my fellow supervisors.
So your vote is for the smallest number of roads first.
Oh, my vote is what my district get the
All right,
most.
Just teasing.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I should know this, but do we already have the program in place that is going to assist us in knowing, in having the road names, the mileage, the condition? We have that already in place?
It ties in, I'm sorry to interrupt, it ties into our GIS system. There's specialized software that they've used to do the assessment, but it all links back into our GIS system so that we're able to manage the road segments on a link basis. I might add that on the map, I think there are still a couple of little glitches with GIS segments that didn't print out right, so you'll see some white gaps in where there are obvious errors in the roadway. We're working to get those ironed out. It's a thing that we're working on with the county GIS rather than the programmatic issues here.
Thank you, Brent. At this time, I'd like to open up to the public for comments. Do you have any speaker cards?
Steve Rosati, county resident. I was here for something different, but one of the things, of course, it's a great presentation and, of course, funding, how we're going to fund it. So I really want to express to the Board of Supervisors, as I have at COG, to make sure and reconsider coming back with a sales tax initiative. Just you have to rework it. It's not that far off. As I've said, it's, I believe, something that can be achieved. But you're going to have to keep into consideration including a little bit more definitions and details and whatnot that the public wanted to cash that extra 10% that you need to carry over. So don't feel frustrated that it can never be achieved. He presented a lot of points, and that sales tax would really help a lot.
Thanks for your comments.
So, Steve, was that a volunteering to help with that?
I'm here.
Okay.
I take that as a yes.
What's that?
I take that as a yes.
Yeah.
Valerie Egland, San Juan. Listening to the roads report, the pavement conditions, living over between San Juan and Aromas, those rural streets do need a terrific amount of work. But one thing that I have been documenting over the last couple of years, because it gripes me so much, that when we have rain or when the ag businesses are watering next to the road, that we have certain drivers that enjoy driving right at the edge of the road and weaving off and on the road, deteriorating the edges of that pavement. And I'm wondering if it's not possible to stiffen up our ordinances such that the sheriff or the police have a little more power to arrest or to go after. I spoke to one sheriff one day that I found parked not far away, and I asked him about it, and he said it was a county-wide problem. And if you're coming in off of Southside Road, in that area, you can see where people have driven off into the orchards and back on again for a little fun. But these things are costing us money. Also, the trucks parking on the bicycle path outside of San Juan, it's been a little bit of an issue. Thank you.
Any other comments by members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Certainly, any other questions from members of the board? I know that this doesn't require any action. It's just receiving the report.
Well, I just want to make a comment. I think Ms. Eglin brought up a couple of points that in the rural areas, agriculture needs to keep the water off the roads and the mud off the roads. Some incidental happenings do occur, but for the most part, I think it would be great if there was some mechanism of code enforcement that backs people off of the the county right-of-ways, and it's pretty rampant. You don't see that in a lot of places as you do in our own county. I think we've always been supportive of agriculture, but at the same time, they got to, this is a valuable public asset as it was, presented to us this morning. And the other point I wanted to make, as Supervisor Taylor Cruz mentioned in his supervisor's report, we have to start thinking about, coming back with a special sales tax for these roads. And I think we all recognize areas that we could have improved on the measure. And 2018 is a long time. It's not that far off. So I certainly want to try to work on that, and hopefully we gain consensus on this board on how to approach that and convey it to COG and to our two cities as well.
Okay, at this time, no further questions from board. We'll break for lunch, and we'll be back at 1:30.